Welcome to Impact Pasadena. It's my great pleasure to have as my guest today Chief John Perez from the Pasadena Police Department. The chief is actually a 33-year veteran of the Pasadena Police Department. My congratulations to you. I don't know if it's congratulations or some condolences, but you were recently named the chief. And just a little bit about you and your background. You grew up in LA and you went to Cal State, Dominguez Hills, I understand. And you started in the Pasadena Police Department as a cadet.
Yes.
Which I see the cadets around, and I think this is just great. How did you end up deciding to become a cadet and then follow it through your career?
Well, I'll tell you, it was something I wanted to do when I was very young. I was impacted by some neighborhood violence as a young kid.
Yeah.
I come from a big family, 7 brothers. Family was migrated from Mexico. And so I think when you're young and you look at all these events that happen, you make a decision about what you want to do about it. And for me, young, it was about being a police officer. So at 18 years old, I applied for a police cadet here in Pasadena. Very fortunate to get the job. I was very young at 20 and a half before I finished college.
Wow.
To be chosen to go to the police academy.
Yeah.
And at 21, I was in the street, and it was a very harsh learning experiences every day, and the realities of life, knowing that people don't call the police every day to your home because everybody's doing their homework and everybody's getting along. Just the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so it's the reality of that over the years, working narcotics, working undercover during the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, being here for the riots, being challenged as a community with the level of gang violence we're having in the 1980s. It started back in the late 1970s.
Yeah.
And I think it was just, for me, I believe there was something more to be done. And working all these different assignments over the years,
yeah.
I really had the opportunity to promote and go back for my own education and really make this into a career I was going to believe. I didn't know I'd be here 34 years later. Here
Chief
I am.
of Police.
Yeah, Chief of Police. That wasn't in the cards, and so I appreciate that and respect my city manager and the council, along with so many people in our community that have support in what I'm doing. It's the first time in almost 3.5 decades we hired from the inside.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate all the members of the organization having that much trust, in me to do that as well.
So just going back, 34 years is a long time, so you've got a broad perspective on how the society's changed, how Pasadena's changed, and how policing has changed. And I know that Pasadena is not unique. We're facing a lot of the same issues that people are facing around the country.
Absolutely.
In policing. So just talk about policing specifically and some of the ways that it's changed that you've seen here in Pasadena or around the country.
Absolutely. In the 1980s, I think, without a doubt, we were challenged with the level of crime that was occurring. It was the crack and the gang epidemic that hit all societies, all communities across this country. We got hit hard here in Pasadena with a high double-digit homicide rates, many people being shot every week in our community. It was just a very difficult place, and all mostly in one segment of the city, which made it even more tragic. For one community not to be able to expand and grow and to do more things in life other than worry about the fear of crime, and the actual occurrence of crime is terrible.
Yeah.
So I think we had a huge problem with crime. It's a fact with the rates that were here back then.
Right.
We had a lack of neighborhood organization to have organizations working together for the social ills that cause these problems. I don't think we were organized enough to really get that done. The quality of life challenges were everywhere. Dilapidated buildings and places like that. Parks weren't used very often. And I think you could see that through the years, how difficult it was to try to manage through as a police officer in our communities. And our youth population was exploding at the time as well. Whenever you have a large increase in youth population, there's going to be a portion that become disorganized in their thoughts and in their activities and their behavior and begin to commit crime. If you don't catch it early enough by a family, we depend on the community to do that. If that doesn't happen, we wait for the school districts to do that. If the school districts can't do it back then, you had the police departments that when prevention, intervention failed, you had enforcement. And what was the cause of that? Over the years, we saw higher incarceration levels. We saw really disorganizations of our communities. I think it's been difficult. In the early 90s, we saw the formation of community policing, better neighborhoods, quality of life issues, and we're starting to use technology to our advantage, and I could see that growth into the 1990s. The riots set us back. in 1992. On April 29th, it was terrible. I was in LA at the time working narcotics, and we were impacted in this community just to work here for almost a week without going home, and the smell of smoke and the amount of people that went to jail. It was a terrible place that you just didn't ever want to see that again in a career. So since that point, the city, the three things I've seen the city really grow and change has been about economic development. I've seen the city really put the money in the right places to have better parks, better buildings. I love the restaurants coming in on Lincoln, for example, the north part of the city. It really has grown. And the other part of that has been policing strategies have improved with technology. We're better trained. I think we're getting at many of these issues to understand ourselves when we are out policing. And the third part I saw in the 1980s was about youth outreach and community outreach. I saw many organizations, and I got to know during those late 1980s was Jaylene Mosley, who just recently passed, and all that she brought to us in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and closer to 2020, where she brought a lot of great influences, vision for all of us, even in policing. For me to know there's nothing you're supposed to do on the enforcement side without understanding that prevention and intervention are big parts of that equation to understand that.
Yeah, so just to pull apart a few things you said, because that's really fascinating. First of all, the youth segment is probably the highest potential crime segment that we have in our population. I mean,
14 to 29 years old is where we see that most of the criminals are sitting.
Yeah, so I think one of the things you're getting at, and I know it's reflected in your work, is that policing is not isolated from the community, obviously, but it's also not isolated from all the social services that need to be provided for, as you said, youth intervention, follow-up for formerly incarcerated inmates. All these social services. So the policing isn't in an isolation. It's just not about enforcement. It's about some other stuff. So is that a change in philosophy that you've seen? Is it something that's happening around the country from your experience? I know you travel to conferences and you hear about what's going on in other police departments.
Absolutely. Over the years, we've been fortunate in Pasadena. We've been a leader in many of these areas through the decades. And at this point, I think we're looking for a place where we could continue that leadership, that change by looking where we need it the most. But police departments across this country are making dynamic changes, no matter how small, no matter how large, no matter your crime rate, connection to the community, having core relationships, partnerships in the business districts, in the neighborhood, with city departments, with our youth is everything, or it means nothing. And police chiefs, police departments, we do function off of goals, objectives, values of our organization. But before we get there, we have to actually understand our community. We have to function under the city's vision and the goals we're trying to achieve as a city. Otherwise, the police department or any other department is not going to fit. You're going to be doing things off from what the city vision is going to be. So there's a lot of education for ourselves, a lot of education for the community, for us to understand one another, to influence and be influenced.
Well, let's dig down a little bit on the populations, because I know that we have a sizable, I'll just say, homeless population in Pasadena, and it's a problem across the state. There's some funding going into it. There are issues about how to fund the services. But I know that many of the homeless population suffer not only economically, but also they have psychological problems and things like that. So that's a big challenge for police, for the cops.
Yeah, so I could tell you that in the 1980s we did see a lot of homeless happening because of the drug epidemic with crack cocaine. What we're seeing, and from my view, the epidemic is about mental illness, is about self-medication with methamphetamine, I think. And we're seeing a lot of these problems in our community. From all I could read in logotherapy and other type of psychological platforms, if you have a mental illness and it goes at least 2 years without being addressed, chances of reversing that are very difficult, and chances for somebody to stay on medication for a lifetime are very difficult, whether it be costs or anything else. So in this town, we just recently saw a decrease in the number, and so some people say, well, that number might not be real. It seems like it's a lot worse than that. How could it decrease? I mean, we're looking at the fact that we have the Metro Rail, we have the light rail systems. People come in and out of town. So when you do these counts, you don't know how many you're counting that are actually here or went back. We come across homeless that aren't always homeless. I'm seeing a lot of youth. I'm talking people into their, not just their teens, but their 20s, maybe even early 30s, where they're retrievable. They're not going home maybe once, maybe twice a week. They might be sleeping in the garage. It's just a matter of time before that disappears and families cannot reach out regularly to give them the help they need.
Sure.
So this is going to be our issue going forward for the police department. Our everyday issue we're dealing with is homeless and quality of life challenges that we have. We always have to be prepared on the other side for crime trends that go up, whether it be burglaries or gang violence, which have greatly reduced in this town, but they haven't been eliminated. And we are concerned about the socioeconomic issues that cause young people to decide to obtain a gun, to put it in their waistband, to take it out, to point it at somebody, to put the finger on the trigger and to pull it more than once.
Right.
This is a terrible decision-making pattern for young people. And so we have to make sure we don't lose sight of this, but we're trying to address this issue here. And we have a HOPE team. We have neighborhood action bicycle officers we added last year. The department's under a complete restructure over the next 1 year. It's almost like a sign out front that says construction going on here.
Oh, yeah.
And it's being remodeled, not just physically, but we're looking at every part of all our resources. And this is not just the police chief saying this is the way it's going to be. I have turned to nearly 400 employees and said, hey, look, what kind of car do you want me to build for you? So we're having frontline retreats for the officers, the civilian workforce, our supervisors, and every line, every step, they're telling us what needs to be done. To balance that, we are reaching out to the community. We're going to start our second set of community conversations later this summer, and it'll be about workshops this time. Workshops with the police officers at a table like this with a whiteboard to talk about expectations. What part of those expectations do I need to put into our priorities? At the end of this research, at the end of the engagements with the police department, with the community, department heads, three things have to come out of it. Number one is complete building of the police department, restructured to address the issues that we have today going forward. Number one. Number two, we have to relook at our priorities. Are they meeting what we need, or do we need to redo these priorities to make new ones? And we just developed some last year. Are they still good? What is our top priorities we have? The third part of what we're doing is building an internal professional development curriculum for our people. No matter where you work in the organization, the college is coming to you. We are going to put you in a class to learn more about ourselves, about our community, about the science of policing, and the best that we can is to go out to the community to do two things. One, to listen, to learn, and to also educate on the difficult part of policing. Because one of the things that came out of our community conversations late last year and early this year was the fact that the community told me, we learned a lot about your officers. They're much like my kids, my next door neighbors. A lot of them have fathers or mothers who are pastors. Very diverse community, very educated. So I think a lot of people started to think, you know what, this is a difficult job.
Yeah, and also I think when you see people as individuals instead of just the uniform, you know, you start to, it's funny because I lived back in New York City for a while, and you know, they had the cops on the beat, and you'd get to know these guys for 20 years. Now it's different in California because it's a different kind of situation.
We're trying to get back there. We're going to see a change in that, and neighborhood policing is returning. We are talking with the command staff that I have, and we're all in agreement. We need to bring it back. People need to know who they are. And now with social media, it should be easier for us because now we have so many new challenges in today's policing. I really didn't get into it, whether it be active shooter, the terrorism threat, the concern with crime going up, and though people are coming out of prison more, for the most part, they're doing well. The ones that don't, we have to be concerned about that. So all these things are new challenges for us now.
So let's dig down a little bit on that. You mentioned gang and gang violence, and I believe you had said to me earlier that that gang homicides have really decreased over the years. So that's one indicator of an improvement, but gang activity, I suppose, is still an issue for you.
Absolutely, because I could talk about the crime rate right now, and we have no gang homicides, and we only had 2 shooting victims in Pasadena. That doesn't mean over the next 2-3 weeks we're not going to suffer through a retaliatory type of events between 2 gangs. There's a lot of, for us, science behind it when there is a gang shooting. Is it gang involved or is it gang related? The difference is that a person might be involved in gangs on both sides, might be arguing about money or a relationship they had with somebody that causes that might not cause a retaliation. Other times, it's complete retaliation for an historical problem or a new problem that has developed, where they start shooting at one another in neighborhoods, and that really requires us to try to be out ahead of it, but at the same time trying to stop it. And the most difficult part of policing forever, and now we're seeing it today with the 3 national voices of community relations, policing oversight, and the use of force, whether it be deadly force or less than that, is that we are seeing the outcome of officers having to make difficult decisions on what we call field investigations.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for a police officer to do is to stop somebody believing that there's a crime being committed. Much easier in life for that officer to take that belief and drive down the street and wait for the 911 call or wait for somebody who truly needs help.
Right.
The more difficult part of police work, and our community has to decide where they want their police officers to be, is saying, hey, look, I think that person might have a gun. I think they're a gang member.
Yeah.
How do I approach this? There's a lot to that. We're trying to teach officers to learn about themselves on unconscious thoughts and subjective thinking that you may have. And it's just very difficult for us to do that. And we provided 2 training sessions so far, and we'll continue this going forward.
I mean, that sounds to me like from when I first moved here 25 years ago, in not just Pasadena, but LA in general, that sounds like a real change in terms of the philosophy of policing. You know, I mean, that's looking at it from as an outsider, but just the way you're talking is sounds really a different approach to me. And it's a response, I know, to real events.
We got great agencies like the Los Angeles Police Department for years have been either forced to find new models or were innovative in creating new models.
Right.
And having regular contact with police chiefs in the area, more than ever before, we're all connected and we exchange with one another to learn about what we're doing and really bouncing off each other. And I think that's really helpful.
So let's talk about use of force, which you bring up. I know there's a national debate on guidelines, and it probably depends somewhat on the localities. But what's your view or your philosophy towards that? I know there are issues have come up in Pasadena as individual cases.
Always will. You know, and I don't say this with any humor at all, but there's no officer involved shooting you're ever going to see that you're going to like. Never. I don't care what the circumstances are. It's tragic to me that we continue to put these videos on public access. There's people that have kids that have been, you know, have died at the hands of the police for whatever reasons, and it's forever in video for the public, for kids, for their kids or grandkids to watch, and it bothers me. But that is where we're at today. Use of force in this country, it is one of the larger, one of the 3 voices I talked about nationally.
Yep.
And here locally, we looked at this last year when I was the interim chief, and we decided that there was something more to be done. We had conversations at the command staff level, and we said to ourselves that there's got to be something better than just reacting to the use of force and us evaluating it, whether it be in policy or out of policy. The health industry has something called a 30-day review. If they're on the floor and somebody were to pass or some serious event happened, away from the legal, the risk management, or the internal affairs investigations that we do with these, push those aside, they do what's called a 30-day brief. It's not documented, it's between the people who have the right to talk, to say, how do we do this better tomorrow? How do we get into this event if it happens to us like this again? How do we improve so this doesn't happen again? So we've taken this last year, and in April, we decided to put a 30-day review in where our use of force Sergeant Roger Rodan is able to pull the officers in, watch the video with the body-worn cameras, one of the first agencies to go with body-worn cameras full-time. And so we watch these videos, not without the command staff, it's just the subject matter expert and the officers involved.
Right.
And they watch this video and they have a conversation. Officers make better decisions. It's much like a football player watching their own plays after a football game saying, I could have tackled better, I could have done this better. The officers are coming to their own decisions, we're not driving those. What we saw between April and December, we saw a 30% decline in use of force. I'd like to say, you know, oh yeah, we did it. It's the officers that did it. It's the ones that decided there was better ways. And the way to do this is not just by deciding to use force, but to use other options such as wrestling, control holds, those type of things, and having good handcuffing techniques. That's really helpful for an officer to have the confidence to say, I don't need to tase you. I think I can get in there and 3 of us could hold you down until we got you and we could handcuff you. And so that becomes the most difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we know it's a tough job, but I just wondered for the average officer, you know, the officer who's in the patrol car, how they're feeling about the things like the use of force debate, first of all, but also things like body camera, more transparency. You know, you sort of indicate that it's a positive for them, but is that your impression?
We are absolutely getting better because of some of this transparency and accountabilities. I'm going to say we are, but we've hit a point of ultra accountabilities.
Yeah.
And you know, and this past week I must have had it asked of me twice. Can't you just shoot the weapon out of their hand or shoot them in the leg instead of aiming for the mass or doing something else? I said, well, it's all good and dandy until we miss and it hits some innocent person in the back as we try to shoot a weapon out of their hand. It just, and even when we do use deadly force, people will still come at us for a little bit until the impact of a taser or maybe a rubber bullet, a foam bullet, it impacts them. They may still come at us a little bit until we have some control of them. So I think the officers in the car, I believe it, that what they worry about the most is that the general public, for the most part, is led by faulty media, faulty reporting, faulty journalism, faulty beliefs. Some of it's accurate, and they realize that. They absolutely do. But when beliefs are led the wrong way, it becomes a problem for us. And when we find out way later many things we believe in society about margarine or these different type of sugars.
That's right.
So we find out way down the fact that, hey, we shouldn't have been doing that. So we worry as police officers, many of our officers worry that the public really is not getting the point. Because I said this last time to James Farr, but if you wanted this cup, and I didn't want to give it to you, and you want me to cooperate with you, and I just didn't want to, no matter what you do, I'm not giving this up until you reach your hand over here to grab it, then you and me have a problem, right? It becomes one of those issues. So policing is much like that. We try to use, they call it de-escalation, but really it is about cooperation and communication. And we have been talking about this since the 1800s. When Sir Robert Peel created the 9 principles of policing in London. And this has not changed since then. All these aspects of the law of necessary and reasonable and all these things were talked about in the 1850s with Sir Robert Peel. And so we're still dealing with the human nature of having to make the best decisions in a quick amount of time and hoping you do it right.
I have 2 thoughts about that. I mean, my father and grandfather are both war veterans, and they went through it, and they always talked about the fog of war, you know, that the amount of information and the quick decisions that you have to make are very difficult. The other thing is the media. I mean, you know, just that the crime shows on TV, people get an impression of what policing is like, and it's really not accurate.
It's not accurate, and so the issue for us to get at that, we have had 2 of them over the last year, and we're looking to do another one this year. It's a Policing 101 course. Or at the police range, we bring media or interested community people, stakeholders to come in and go through a quick overview of the law and how we do these and understand the body-worn cameras. And then we put them through not just digital screens to shoot or don't shoot. We put them through actual role-playing scenarios. And they understand, it's not so much if they shot or didn't shoot. We understand that most of the time you probably will make these mistakes, but it's the emotional part of the process that you're going through in your body. Somebody suddenly is yelling at you and you just finished, you know, driving around listening to your favorite song. Now somebody's just in your face.
And we are human beings. And we're wired in a certain way.
And suddenly you look like you're telling me you're going to shoot me or something might go on. I take my weapon out and you're reaching for something. It is difficult not knowing if somebody's going to be an active shooter in today's world. Somebody is looking to die at the hands of the police because it's suicide by cop. Or some other issues where they're not wanting to make these mistakes, but they are making them and during their contact with the police because of a call for service or some crime that was just committed. So it's very difficult to really understand this.
And I imagine this takes, because you're talking about a certain amount of emotional restraint that comes from training. And I imagine that takes a toll on an individual when you have to be, you have to say, well, now, sir or ma'am, you know, let's calm down here, and they're yelling in your face, or they give you the finger, or whatever it is. I mean, that's something that's counter to our human nature.
Well, it's amazing. I was watching the Dragnet episode the other night. I was watching it, and I watched the way the officer was cutting off the citizen, saying, hey, answer my questions here, you know, the facts. In today's world, that probably would have created a complaint, saying the officer can't talk to me that way. So we have changed our ways over the years. But what we're doing for training, we call it immersive training. It's much like doing the football play live at practice over and over again. It's immersive. You're understanding the dynamics, the physicalness of it all. So we are training in that perspective to get police officers to understand the immersive, the effectiveness versus the efficiency of training. You and I could walk through the 100% efficiency in training on having a control hold on me. But it becomes a measure of effectiveness now. Becomes I'm really mad at you, and I'm really not going to let you put me in that control hold. Now we'll see how effective you really are with this thing. So we may see a huge efficiency level of near 100%, but the effectiveness level in real life is not that at all. And the fog of war, as you heard about, that causes these decision-making processes because oh man, this worked in the in the academy for you. Now it's not.
Yeah.
What do we do?
And you're getting information overload.
And you're quickly changing
Yeah.
your approach. You're hoping something works.
Right.
And when it doesn't, then we all know about it.
That's right.
So.
Tasers, how's that working out?
Tasers have been a positive addition to our use of force options. I have seen officers use the taser as opposed to using their weapon, and we know that it's decreased the number of officer-involved shooting based on threats.
Right.
We have now just transitioned to the newest level of technology on tasers, where your body-worn camera automatically turns on when you pull out your taser,
right.
and the wires are better so you can't break them. The darts are a little bit better,
yeah.
and it gives you 2 shots instead of just 1. Even though they were a great addition, I saw these problems a few years back where people out of prison would turn or use their jacket, so the darts would hit the jacket and one would dart off, and they were
right.
still good to fight again.
Right.
It took the officer a while to have to take out a cartridge, put another one in.
Yeah.
The new technology, the new tasers are allowing us to go at it quicker, faster, and becoming even more efficient. Because the last thing you want is for a taser not to work,
yeah.
and having to transition to your firearm.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're trying to avoid through
Right.
training and everything else.
But I would imagine that some people who are particularly mentally ill or in crisis state or high or whatever can overcome sort of the power of the taser. Is that right, or is that just sort of?
We don't usually see that. They might recover quicker.
Yeah.
At times for whatever reasons, but
Yeah.
the taser does have an impact on them now. The tasers we're transitioning from, sometimes the prongs wouldn't go in the correct place, and they
Right.
wouldn't feel the electricity, which just travels on the top part of your skin.
I see.
And nothing doesn't go in, but the top part.
Yeah.
So both of the prongs aren't in correctly. One is off,
Yeah.
or it's too far of a spread. You're not going to get that, so they could still fight. Or if they have a jacket on,
Right.
it might not penetrate the skin.
Yeah.
You have all these different challenges we have that for somebody who thinks you just deploy it and you're good.
Yeah.
No, sometimes one of the darts misses,
Yeah.
doesn't penetrate the jacket.
Yeah.
They've been able to spin and break the wires before.
Yeah.
All these different things cause us problems.
happens.
Now with the new technology, it's a little bit better, but there'll still be challenges with those.
Sure. Are there any new tools like that are coming along that you think that you're excited about?
I saw some testing with foam. It's a long way off, but just shoot some foam at you and you're stuck, right?
Yeah,
we saw
yeah.
that in the cartoons growing up.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that I see some, it's really not, going as fast as I want.
Yeah.
I see some tethering of wires where they shoot at you and it goes across your body.
Huh.
That has some problems with it.
Yeah.
So, we'll keep looking for solutions. We'll never find the perfect solutions. We just know most of the time what we have in equipment is working and is
Yeah.
working well.
Yeah.
Everything is an evolution, right? Any thought
Sure.
process we have is an evolution. So I think much like policing,
Yeah.
we are evolving now to today's advantages in intelligence-led policing, using technology, smarter officers, better relationships in the community.
Yeah.
All these things, we're hoping the prevention, intervention reduces that need for the engagement. at the end
Yeah,
of
and
the day.
also, I mean, the laser is a great example of a larger issue, which is that some stuff that works in the abstract or in theory or in the lab or whatever, when you get out on the street, doesn't necessarily work when it's in
Back to the efficiency and the effectiveness theories,
Yeah,
right? One
yeah.
might work great because I'm standing there and, oh yeah, you got me, it's great. Well, let's see as I'm moving and I'm yelling and these other things are happening, so I think that becomes the challenge for us.
Yeah, great. Well, Chief, I would love it if you could stay for one more segment. We have a lot more to talk about. This has been great already, and I'm so honored and delighted that you're here, and I hope we can continue this.
My time is your time, sir. I
Yeah,
appreciate
beautiful.
it.
Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you, Chief, so much. And we'll just...